We immediately offered a support to the District of Columbia, which submitted a direct request for law enforcement support through the Emergency Management Assistance Compact. I directed Colonel Jones to immediately mobilize our entire mobile field force of 200 specially trained Maryland State Police troopers to provide security for our nation's capital. I also instructed General Gowen to immediately call up our initial response force of the Maryland National Guard. Right in the middle of that meeting with our security team, I got a phone call from House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, who was calling me saying that he and Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer were all together in an undisclosed bunker they've been spirited off to, some undisclosed location, that the U.S. Capitol Police was overwhelmed, that there was no federal law enforcement presence, and that the leaders of Congress were pleading with me as the governor of Maryland for assistance from Maryland's National Guard and State Police. I informed Speaker Hoyer and the other leaders that a force of specially trained riot police equipped to respond to civil disturbances, along with members of allied and local law enforcement agencies, were already en route to the Capitol. I also told them that I authorized the mobilization of the Maryland National Guard and that I was ready, willing, and able to immediately deploy them to the Capitol. However, we were repeatedly denied approval to do so. Under federal law, the mayor of the District of Columbia does not have authority over the Guard, and we must receive approval from the Secretary of Defense before we're able to send our Maryland National Guard across the border into the federal city, into the District of Columbia. So we had a little back and forth trying to get that authorization. In the meantime, we did not hesitate. We continued to mobilize and get ready so that if and when we finally got that approval, we could immediately move. Approximately an hour and a half later, I got a call on my cell phone from the Secretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy, who gave us the authority that we needed to be able to move into the city. The initial contingent of Maryland National Guard members were the first to arrive in Washington from out of state. I just got back from the D.C. Armory, where I had a chance to meet with and thank some of the members of the National Guard for their service on this important mission to protect our nation's capital. I thank them for their service, and I told them that this assault on our democracy cannot stand. I just want to assure all Americans that the state of Maryland will do anything and everything we possibly can to continue to secure the core of our nation's capital and to ensure the peaceful transition of power. Today we are extending the Maryland National Guard's mission in Washington, D.C. through the inauguration and the end of the month. As part of a coordinated effort with federal and local law enforcement, the Maryland State Police's mobile field force team provided security support to restore the peace at the U.S. Capitol building last night, and also assisted the Metropolitan Police throughout the night with the enforcement of curfew violations. Maryland State Police commanders are in constant communication with D.C. law enforcement officials, and we have assured them that we will continue to provide any further assistance that they require. I spoke to Mayor Bowser last night and offered her Maryland's full support in the days and the weeks ahead. In addition, Maryland State Police, as well as the Maryland Capitol Police, some of which you see around here, have increased security around the Maryland State House complex. There's been a number of incidents at state capitals and governor's mansions around the country. It is somewhat fitting that we are addressing this shameful attack on our democracy from this historic state house, which is the very first peacetime capital of the United States. After all, it was right here that the peaceful transition of power was born 236 years ago after leading the colonies to victory in the Revolutionary War. General Washington resigned his commission as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army right here, right there, in our old Senate chamber. At the time, the idea that a military leader would voluntarily transfer power to the people's representatives was virtually unthinkable and was without precedent in human history. But this selfless act secured our nation's future as a democratic republic and as the leader of the free world. Generations of Americans have sacrificed their lives, their fortunes, and sacred honor so that the miracle of self-government and the orderly transition of power could become commonplace. Over the last 2 months, this sacred tradition has come under attack from our own president, who has chosen to fan the flames of hate and mislead millions of voters through lies and conspiracy theories, rather than face the reality of his own defeat. I grew up in the shadow of the United States Capitol. I proudly stood by my father's side at age 12 on the floor of the House chamber as we both took the oath of office, an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. It's clear to me that President Trump has abandoned this sacred oath. What we saw in the nation's capital was not just an attack on the people's representatives or historic buildings and our law enforcement. It was an attack on the rule of law, the foundations of self-government, and who we are as Americans. The mob may have shattered glass, but they did not, and they will not, shatter our democracy. From governors and secretaries of state and the judiciary and the Congress, our institutions have held firm in the face of this attempted insurrection. But we remain at a fragile moment. And each of us, especially those who hold elective office, have a choice to make. We can show those who feel forgotten that we can actually deliver solutions to the serious problems that face us. Or we can continue to perpetuate this toxic politics, rabid tribalism, and hatred. We can either face the truth or be destroyed by lies. We can either descend into chaos and rancor, or we can rise above and meet this test with real courage and patriotism. I could never fathom a day like yesterday in America, but I will not stand for it, and neither should any American. I think I speak for many Americans when I say enough is enough. Enough of the lies, enough of the hate, enough of the total dysfunction, just enough. And I promise to do everything in my power to rebuild trust in what makes this nation great, to heal old wounds rather than inflame them, and to make sure that democracy that the people always prevail. And God bless the great state of Maryland and the United States of America. With that, I'd be happy to take some questions.
Governor, what did the Secretary of Defense say? What, in denying authorization for the Maryland National Guard, what was the reason given?
Well, none of us really spoke to the Secretary of Defense, but we were repeatedly, General Gowan was repeatedly being told by the National Guard at the national level that we did not have authorization. I was actually on the phone with Leader Hoyer, who was pleading with us to send the Guard. He was yelling across the room to Schumer, and they were back and forth saying, we do have the authorization. And I'm saying, I'm telling you, we do not have the authorization. And so we had multiple times, the general was, we running up the flagpole, we're ready, don't have authorization, don't have authorization. And then I get a call an hour and a half later out of the blue, not from the Secretary of Defense, not through what would be normal channels. I got a number I don't recognize on my phone. I, pick it up anyway. Larry Hogan. And it's like, this Ryan McCarthy, Secretary of the Army, Governor, can you come as soon as possible? It was, it was like, yeah, we've been waiting. We're ready. I can't tell you what was going on the other end on the decision-making process. There's been lots of speculation in the media about that, but I'm not privy to what was going on inside the White House or inside the Pentagon.
Governor, should the President resign? Should we invoke the 25th Amendment? Where are you at with that discussion?
Yeah, look, here's where I am. I think there's no question that America would be better off if the President would resign or be removed from office, and if Mike Pence, Vice President of the United States, would conduct a peaceful transition of power over the next 13 days until President Biden is sworn in. Now, how the details of if that's going to happen or how that should happen, I don't know. But I think Vice President Pence, who's a friend and has been for a long time, I have tremendous respect for. I think he did the right thing, stood up for the rule of law, stood up to protect the Constitution. There's speculation that he was involved in finally making the decision about the National Guard. I don't know. But we need leadership right now, and we need to stop all of this craziness.
Governor, how many National Guard members and Maryland State Troopers are in Washington now?
So we have 500 members of the National Guard right now. We have about 200 Maryland State Police and other allied agencies, but they're actually just outside the city now. They finished their mission last night successfully. And they're communicating they're still mobilized and still ready to provide whatever assistance that the Metropolitan Police or the Capitol Police request. But we're waiting for the next mission. So they're called up and mobilized, but not taking direct action right now as we speak.
Governor, you said it took an hour and a half to get the clearance. How much sooner would the Guard have arrived at the Capitol had you gotten that clearance the first time?
Well, it's hard to say. There is time to ramp up. So in discussions with General Gowan, the National Guard, they have to get ready. So my decision, along with our security team and the general, was, well, I don't want to wait to get the authorization and then get people ready. So I'm going to authorize them. So you call them up, get them mobilized, and then we'll be closer to being in the city when we get the call. It took a little longer, but we were the first ones to arrive. Maryland was the very first Guard to show up.
What did the Guard do when the Guard members from Maryland arrived?
We protected the U.S. Capitol.
Does this new mission change the Guard's role in vaccine?
And the Library of Congress.
Does this new mission change the Guard's role with vaccine deployment?
No, we still have the Guard we have different teams of people. It's ironic, but we've been focused like a laser on the vaccine. Today we crossed 100,000 vaccines. We had another team of Guard deployed into Prince George's County to assist them with their vaccines. Yesterday we were into Charles County. So we're still utilizing the Guard for other missions, but this was a different group of Guard that we had to send down to help protect the nation's capital.
Governor, I take it, given what you have been describing to us, that there was no pre-planning before yesterday for any sort of eventualities? with the state or?
Well, there's been ongoing discussions that with all the federal agencies and all of our state agencies for a long time about the inauguration, which we're always involved in. But this particular mission yesterday, it just seemed to be a little dysfunctional. And I can't explain. I don't know. I don't think any of our team knows exactly why the U.S. Capitol was not protected and how this treacherous mob was able to break through. But all I can tell you is what we did immediately to try to help stop the situation.
Last question.
Have you had any conversations? The inauguration is in 13 days. Have you had any conversation about Maryland's involvement? I guess the first
Yeah.
question is, do you think they can safely hold an inauguration in 13 days?
Well, I know that our entire team and every agency is talking to every federal agency, has been for months and months, as we do every inauguration. And I'm sure everybody's concerned about how to do it safely. I haven't personally been involved in discussions over the past day or so on inaugural planning, but I know they're continuing to proceed and trying to make sure they can do it in a safe way. It's one of the reasons why we now have, in addition to us, I think we have 5 other states of National Guard. The 6,000 Guard members are now in the city, and they're all planning to be available through the inauguration.
Governor, the legislative session starts next week.
It does?
It might have been on your mind, it might not been. I was curious, what are your top priorities going into that? And can you tell us a little bit more
Sure.
about what
Yeah,
you're
we actually had hoped to be focused on that today. It was going to be about some of our legislative priorities, and of course we got completely distracted on more important things. But next week, I think we'll be announcing. Look, our priorities for the session are pretty simple. It's we're focused on the response to the virus and the recovery of our economy. And we had a great, productive discussion yesterday before all of this happened with the Speaker and the Senate President to talk about. I think we all share the same desire. That the most important priorities are, the struggling Marylanders, struggling businesses, helping people get the assistance they need, providing more economic relief, and continuing to, fight the virus. So that's what we're going to be focused on, and we'll likely have multiple announcements next week to talk about.